to have a child who's an artist. I speak this because my dad had me, who was an artist. People don't really understand us artists. They think we're weird, they think we're whatever. Then it's also difficult for a spouse to have a partner who's an artist. I can imagine the conversations. And when so from Zimbabwe, you know what was Zimbabwe, or you know, so we just want to honor you, my Mabasa. Please come to the front. We just want to celebrate you for allowing this man to do what he does. We thank you very much. We're going to have some words from Mr. Mabasa, but please come to the front. We want to celebrate you and mine as well. It's not on the program, but I think the MC has the, you know, right? Do you have a few words to say about your husband?
When I met him, achiuya kuzokonza ndofunga ndochikore-kore nidaita ushona kuuniversity saka ndakazoti uyo mukomana iwewe ndiwe anonyora ka iwewe takaita mapoems ako kanyara chaizvo but zvakamupa confidence because mangwana akazodzoka akati unozoti ndakanyora bhuku aitofamba nemamanuscripts ake macopies namapens ndakabva ndapiwa hwani zvikazomboverengawo saka ndokanyekachi ndakabva ndapiwa ndasiyirwa manuscript zvikazomboverengawo wozondiudza kuti unofungei saka ndikokanyaya kamapens.
Zvinhu zvinomboitika zvinonetsa, but ndaona dzimwe shamwari dzangu, so ndingapedze imba yese ndichikwazisa vanhu, but let me say, you know, ndiedze kusakanganisa time. I had to write this speech in English, but you know me, I write in Shona. It was because friends who don't understand the language, you know, say, no, we said definitely come. So, ndingazokumbira vanoturikira zvikanetsa. But ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, allow me to say good evening. And I'm so pleased and honored at the same time just to see all of you. Once upon a time is no time and every time. I'm known as Sarungano, the bearer of stories. I have walked through the door of once upon a time many times as both listener and teller. Yet, never, not even in my wildest dreams and imaginings, did I think that June 2005 would become the death of a storyteller, Pakafira Sarungano. Even though I have always known that at some point, stories do come to an end. Tererai. In that fateful month of June 2005, I collapsed, died, and washed my spirit over the shell of my own body, cold and helpless on the hospital floor where I had come to visit my ailing mother. The irony of life is sharp enough to make the dead laugh at human tragedy. I, the visitor to the sick, became the patient of death in a place where healing is supposed to happen. I died in June, before my 55-year-old mother passed away from advanced cancer on 15 August of the same year. Although the storyteller had died, storytelling itself did not. Once upon a time, kept whispering its mysteries, ushering even the dead storyteller into lands where reality bends and takes on unfamiliar shapes. Hovering above my body, I loathed the slime I had once called my flesh. I felt more alive than I had ever felt in the land of the living. Being a spirit person was 1,000,000 times more exquisite than the Coca-Cola invitation to open happiness. It was sweeter than the finger-licking promises of KFC. In my floating spirit body, I saw my wife. I was with her. I saw my wife and my uncle kneeling beside me, their voices trembling with urgency, their hands calling me back to breath. I pitied them. My bespectacled eyes, those faithful windows I had thought were indispensable for sight, were closed, the curtains drawn, and yet my eyes shut, I could see. I saw my own face, my lifeless body, and everything around me in a brightness beyond human vision. The spirit is a mystery, boundless, weightless, wise. Like a feather caught in a quiet breeze, it lifted me gently, rising above the cracked hospital ceiling, above the roof, into a realm where flesh, breath, and heartbeat no longer mattered. Then came the bullying. Intimidating darkness, vast, heaving, impenetrable. Like a grasshopper trapped among the feet of 1,000 stampeding wild beasts. That's what I felt. Raiveri marakati kwirindindi. A darkness that was not just the absence of light, but a living, breathing thing. Before it, I stood at the threshold of the unspeakable. And it was there, at the edge between silence and eternity, that God came. Not as a thunderclap, but as a presence, a rescue, a rewriting of what had been written. This is the story I now hold in my hands like a fragile flame. The story of how God reached into death's shadow, snatched me back, and returned me to life. Yet even if I call this existence life, I now know that this is not the real deal. This is the story of how my once upon a time was reborn, of how God rewrote my story. Death of a Storyteller is the title of my next novel. Thank you. It's a true story. I died. But tonight, I stand here in front of you to share a few stories about the book we are launching, The Mad. One of my friends who is here today once told me that she hates, with a passion, she hates academics, the academic style of writing and speaking. She says, it's removed from people. I don't know who you're writing for. I'm glad she said that, because it confirmed why I wrote my PhD thesis in Shona. knowledge must be deep. Ndinotenda ndaombererwa naprofessor, so munondipasa manyemwe. Prof. Magosongwe, thank you. Knowledge must be decolonized, and knowledge must speak to people. I began writing Mapenzi when I was a 22-year-old student at the University of Zimbabwe. These were the days of Professor Walter Kamba's leadership. Those days were days of radicalism. JT, Joyce Tsitsimti, she remembers those days. Days where we protested even at the slightest, we were with Maduku, Mutambara, Giwa. Those were days of madness. I guess that's why they made. I was fortunate to take a course called the Shona novel that was taught by the late Professor Emmanuel Chiwome. Professor Chiwome was a sage of Shona literature. While my classmates wrote notes to pass exams, I sat listening. For me, each lecture was a creative writing masterclass. Through Chiwome, I understood the history of the Shona novel, its strengths, its weaknesses. That knowledge guided and helped me write a book that would later be described by the late Professor Mowati and the UNISA Professor Mutasa as literature that engages the oppressor in the trenches of intellectual warfare while fighting running literary battles with those in positions of unearned privilege. It is a literature that shoots bullets. I completed Mapenzi in Oslo, Norway, where I had gone to do a master's degree in media and communication. When I returned home in 1998, I submitted the manuscript to 3 publishers, Baobab Books, College Press, and Mambo Press. Baobab Books were fast in replying. I received a letter signed by my friend Irene Staunton, and they told me the story was great, but I needed to develop the main character more. But I had my reasons. For me, developing Amundigone further would have destroyed the impulsive beauty of his madness. That madness is what drove Mapenzi. Then, College Press phoned me. They asked if I had given the manuscript to any other publishers. I said, yes, I've given the manuscript to Baobab Books and Mambo Press. Before I could even continue, the caller cut me short and said, tell them the manuscript has been accepted for publishing by College Press. Just like that. Later, I learned that the man behind that life-changing decision was Chirikure. And tonight, I want to acknowledge him. Majigera ndokusimudza handizi makagara kupi maenda kupi, but Mapenzi would not have seen the light of day were it not for Vachirikure vane maziso anoona shuga iri pasi pekapu yetii. Mapenzi went on to win the Zimbabwe Book Publishers Association Award in 2000, and in 2003 it was listed among Zimbabwe's 75 best books of the century. In 2001, Professor Chiwome, writing in the Times literary supplement, called Mapenzi one, and I'm quoting, one of the most significant books to have come out of Africa. He never knew how much he had influenced me in writing it. I don't think he even knew that I was his student, because back then, we were many, and lecturers would just come, teach, and tutors would then engage with students. So we really didn't have much contact with him. Fast forward 2014, Professor Flora Vetvaald compared the language structure of Charles Mungoshi's Ndiko Kupindana kwamazuva and Mapenzi. After publishing her paper, she suggested that Mapenzi should be translated into English. I told her that Tsitsi Mtiti had already translated it. Flora read Tsitsi's translation, but felt it needed enrichment. We consulted with Irene Staunton, who said, and I quote, "Do try translating it yourself, Ignatius. It will be an interesting experience for you and certainly also an interesting translation." Andre Brink always did his own translations. Only you can really know the richness of an association intended in one particular Shona word or phrase. Flora, however, had a different perspective. Surely a few writers, this is now Flora responding, surely a few writers have translated their own work, but the majority have not. Of course, what Irene says about connotations is true, but that does not mean the author must translate his own work. It means the translator must have an intimate knowledge of and ability to write creatively in the source language. I thought Irene Staunton's suggestion sounded interesting, and so I started translating Mapenzi. But Hamondi Goni was uncontrollable. He started steering the story in another direction, running riot, telling new stories. I had to stop. Later, Flora Wild commissioned Tendai Wuchu to translate Mapenzi. He found the writing style unorthodox, and without guidance from Professor Jacob Mapara, the translation by Wuchu could have ended up completely lost. Eventually, when Wuchu was done, I read his version. I struggled to get excited. It felt too clean, too careful. It lacked the absurdities that gave Mapenzi its raw edge. As Professor Mapara explained, and I quote, "Mapenzi is not a realist novel. It is a farce, a bitter comic portrayal of society. It is mad, it is chaotic, yet deeply truthful." The translation became a battlefield. At one point, Wuchu told Flora, ultimately, that is the translation, ultimately it will be how I view the voices. Bring in several more translators and they will give you several more voices. And Flora shot back, calm down Tendai, stop acting like a prima donna. Yes, you delivered a translation, but you rushed through it. The work in significant parts is not near what I understand by a first draft. Eventually, the Wuchu translation went to Ama Books, they edited it, asked me to review sections, I read them, but again I felt the urge to tear it apart and rewrite. It had become a different book altogether. Jane Morris was wise and respectful. She said, "It's your story. You have to be happy with what finally gets published." In 2020, Professor Evaristo Benyera from UNISA emailed me requesting for permission to translate Mapenzi. His message kind of reminded me that, I had shelved the project. By then, I was exhausted. I wanted to abandon the whole project. Then, I remembered Tsitsi Mtiti's translation. One born out of a love for the book, not a commission. I went back to Tsitsi's translation, and it made me see Harare the dog like I was watching a movie. I told Jane Morris that I had revisited Tsitsi Mtiti's version and that it was what I wanted to be published. Jane was patient. She asked sharp questions and shaped Tsitsi's translation into a beautiful product. Then in 2023, I received an email from the University of Georgia Press, and it read, "My name is Alex Fife, and together with my colleague, I co-edit a new book called African Language Literatures in Translation, which is under contract with the University of Georgia Press. Our aim is to publish English translations of African language novels both new and old. We hope to do so in collaboration with Africa-based presses and to ensure that the translations are available at a reasonable cost on the continent. We would potentially be interested in publishing your novel Mapenzi if it is not already contracted elsewhere. I explained to the University of Georgia that I was already working with Ama Books, who later teamed up with Samantha Vajure of Canadian Heart. Together, they edited, published, and distributed the book that you see today. The University of Georgia, like Samantha said, will be publishing the American edition version of The Med in spring 2026. Thank you. One last story before I close. When the final proofs were done, I sat with Mr. Chirere and Mr. Mpondi, and I don't think Mpondi and we were just talking about how Mapenzi was finally going to be available in English after 25 years. The working title then was Madman. But Mpondi wisely said, Mabasa, that title excludes the women, yet they too are men. So he suggested the title, The Mad. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is how the book came to have its title, The Mad. And in conclusion, I just want to thank the following people in case I'm not allowed to speak again. Cornelia Mabasa, my dear wife. Musazodza vachiri kure kuti ndimagumbo ndingakuvari. Mr. Louis Madafi and Mr. Nimrod Nyakanyanga of Rhodes Investments for making this event possible and beautiful. I would also like to acknowledge Vachiri Kure Majgira, the man who saw potential and gave me a chance. Professor Flora Vetfield for believing and investing in putting Zimbabwean literature on the world map. Tsitsi Mtiti for a friendship that started when we were, learning to write, being mentored by Chenjerai Hobe. You remember how we would gather around Chenjerai Hobe and Chenjerai Hobe. He was very dramatic, Amaye Majigira. Take out his snuff horn, to really make the so that Minyatun's Babuti Magutaura na Nemunyo. I would also like to thank Professor Jacob Mapara. You were supposed to be here, but Lufunga. Oh, Umba, I'm waiting. Here, Mayangu, Wakabato, Nimapanga, Mapenzi, Vanemavanga. I would also like to thank Jane Morris of Ama Books, Samantha Vajure, une naro mzukuru asi naro dzako adzidzana chira. Oh, correct. I would like to thank Mr. Lovemore Kambudzi. Just looking at the cover of The Med, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. The process, although isina kuzotipa zvataitarisira, it was, a very worthwhile process. I'd also like to thank Mr. Raphael Chikukwa, the Executive Director of the National Gallery of Zimbabwe, and his team for, allowing this old friend of the gallery an opportunity to use this space for this lodge. Vachundura Moyo, Varon Mpondi, Vamemory Chirere, University of Georgia Press, asi nemio nekuti dai musina kuuya zvaitiremera hapana chaibuda. Ndinoda kukutendai maita zvenyu.